ton of web content over the years, and I think what it comes down to, the difference is that when the iPad came out, or even when the iPhone came out, we were asked to think a little bit differently. In fact, think very differently. So it was actually about opportunity. The way we thought about design, the way we thought about user-centered design, the way we thought about human interaction with content was much different than with a mouse, right? So I think in a lot of ways, why it's different is we were challenged with something that was super exciting. It's not that the stuff on the web wasn't exciting, because, you know, building for the web is obviously a staple across the board for us. And, you know, obviously the web is merging so much right now, so with mobile. And the reason why we're seeing new experiences is because people are actually thinking in terms of designing for the device, designing for actually how people will interact with the device. And the type of content that's coming out is so friggin' cool, and it's so much fun right now. And so I think, and you know, I'm just gonna give a couple examples of where I thought it was like, you know, game developers, or for example, someone on the e-publishing side, actually us, I'll talk one really quickly about it, but we thought a little bit differently about. There was this game actually called Spider. Did anyone play Spider, Bryce Manor, Secret of Bryce Manor? For me, that was the first. I've been in games for a very long time, and when I saw Spider come out, and I saw how they use the real estate on the device, and then when it went to the iPad, the idea of being able to throw the silk with a spider, create a web, that was such a different game mechanic that I'd ever seen before. I could never imagine doing that with a mouse, actually. I just couldn't, because it was like all of a sudden, I couldn't be the spider with a mouse, but I could almost be the spider with this device, the ability to throw the silk. When we started our e-publishing division in 2010, we hired this guy who was actually a contractor for us, and he came out and he said, you know, I've just created this kind of cool book. It's called Alice for iPad. And I'm like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. What can you do next? And so he created this app called War of the Worlds. Actually, it was a rendition of War of the Worlds. One of the best scenes that I loved about it was thinking about content is that there's this one scene in it where there's a foggy window, and it's, you know, like whenever you see, like, you know, condensation on your window, and his idea was like, I want to basically show that, like, that's like you can wipe off the window and you can then see through the window. You couldn't do that right on the web. So it was that whole thing, and it sounds like, you know, these are squeaking, wiping the condensation off of the window, and then all of a sudden the tripod came through and you could see this cool sort of experience. So to me, it was like people started thinking about the device. They started thinking about the gestural side of things. And not that you can't do that on the web, but there is something very removed with a mouse that just literally, it's giving us the opportunity to think differently. So.
Calvin, I know you have strong opinions on sort of the whole tablet experience.
Yeah, definitely.
So answer that, sort of why you sort of initially too, like all this sort of content that was sort of existed way in the past, you know, immediately sort of came out, you know, on a tablet that sort of skipped sort of the PC generation.
Sure. So Brian did a really good job of describing how designers and developers of the platform approach it. Another way to look at the same question is, how does the user approach it? And the iPad, nothing has ever finally given users a deeply intimate and human and physical relationship with content. And I know that sounds a little strange, but frankly, you have to go there to understand how to really leverage the platform and what what iPad means to the future of what we believe is a human content interface. We all understand HCI, human computer interface, and we've been spending a lot of time, decades, trying to tweak that human computer interface. And a computer interface would be a windowing system and mouse and pointers and, you know, all that shit that frankly you don't need. The user doesn't want. You kind of had to have it, but the user doesn't want that. They don't need that. So when you look at the iPad and you look how my camera works, and you look how watch how users interact with an iPad. They hold it, they embrace it, they bring it into their personal space. We all understand the concept of the personal space. They bring it into their personal space. They work with it like it's a physical representation of the content that they are interacting with. They use their entire arm. You're activating more neurons when you do that. You also have the opportunity to, with multi-touch and gesture, where designers will be like, hey, let's use a lot of like analog metaphors. And right now, analog metaphors people are starting to get kind of sick of it, and they're wondering what the next thing is. But the analog metaphors are what is helping people kind of move to this experience. And over time, People are simply not going to want, not just leave, they're going to start rejecting controls that separate them from content. So, like Steve was saying, there's a lot of things that was really cool on CD-ROM in terms of an immersive experience. But it was never, you were never connected to it. It was always a couple of feet away. It was up at a right angle to your face. You had to put your whole body in an uncomfortable position to be part of that content. And frankly, you could never have an intimate relationship because you were always touching something that touched something else, that moved a pointer, that moved a window, that moved a control to touch the content. And I feel that the iPad is simply an iteration in technology of removing barriers between the human and the content that they want to have a relationship with.
Okay, so Randi, obviously you've been on a lot of sides here. You're on the publishing side now. When you look at the tablet and the rapid adoption, how does it affect your sort of Random House's overall strategy?
Well, when the CD-ROM first came out, the major book publishers sunk a ton of money into CD-ROM development and frankly really got burned. We put a ton of products out there. They sold for a little bit, the market went away, and so we kind of stood in the background a little tentatively until the Kindle launched in 2007, I believe, maybe 2008. But e-ink is great for a linear book, not great for an interactive experience. And while the iPhone became popular and was adopted, people were still a little intimidated by the CD-ROM experience, frankly. But when the iPad launched, we suddenly had a way to take all these other kind of genre books, things like children's books, travel books, education, language learning, any kind of like cooking, and we had a way to create an immersive experience. And frankly, we dove in pretty hard. We purchased Smashing Ideas. We work really closely with them. We try our best to take advantage of all the functionalities that the tablets offer to create a really exciting and immersive experience that belongs on that device. I don't really think Random House believes that we should throw our fiction books, for instance, that people want to read, like the next John Grisham book. That's great. You can use your Kindle or you can use your Kindle app. Or your Nook app to read it, but we really want to create products on the iPad that are engaging. We want to educate, we want to entertain, we want our users to be smiling at the end and wowed by the experience that we've created.
So Randi, so you said the publishers got burned in the CD-ROM market. Why don't you feel you're going to get burned in the tablet market?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's not to say that we won't, I don't know. What has been at least going on in our teams internally is I work really close with the people who produce our enhanced and complex ebooks. And we're constantly looking at this ever-shifting, basically evolving market and trying to figure out where the product belongs. Does it belong in the ebook store? Does it belong on the app market? And over time, that's something that's transitioning. So we have to really take a good look at our content and decide where it belongs and what's the best bang for our buck, so to speak.
Yep.